I'm cooking dinner, and I'm going to be doing this year instead of shooting a movie like last year. Last year, my friend Kaylin and I shot Meat Train. Which was a lot of fun. And our plan was to shoot a sequel, or I guess a prequel. And that filming didn't go so well. We didn't really get enough footage to get anything. I will probably talk about this later, but no Meat Train 2, maybe next year. We'll have to kind of figure that out. So instead of that, so I have something to submit for the Joel Haver, shoot this instead of the Oscars thing, and you're just gonna watch me cook dinner. So I'm just gonna do that. I'm gonna make pasta salad. So I'm gonna boil some pasta, cut up some vegetables. We can talk about it. Hey, can you see me? I'm filling up a pot with water. I don't know if it's awful or not. It's gonna be spring in 2 days. So I'm kind of the mind that it's about time I start cooking with spring vegetables. It's not really exactly totally spring, like in terms of like the spring growing season here in New Jersey, but it's close enough. And you can get basically anything at a grocery store, regardless if it's in season or not. I don't know if that's necessarily my favorite thing in the whole world, but it is convenient, and that's the way grocery stores work now. So I'm doing a spring thing. So I'm doing all the things that kind of come into season in spring. I'm doing sugar snap peas, doing asparagus. I might throw some arugula in there. And I got basil. It's not really basil season, but I don't really care. I'm gonna do some shallot and some lemon zest. I got mozzarella. These are like little mozzarella pearls. These are like little teeny tiny balls of mozzarella. I think a long time ago, I used to do like the big ball of fresh mozzarella and then I cut it up into little cubes. This is just easier and honestly is a little nicer. I like that they're kind of a more uniform size and shape. So I'm gonna do that. And then I'm gonna do some pasta. I'm just kind of throwing together what I have with little forking pasta. So I got some orecchiette and some fusilli. I'm just gonna throw them together. They have about the same cooking time, so I'm not like super worried about it. I'll probably pull you in a little closer when I'm starting to actually like cut stuff up, but as far as cutting up stuff, I really like a wet paper or a wet towel. I used to use a paper towel, but I'm trying to kind of use fewer paper towels as much as I can. I mean, still use them for napkins and specific things like, patting down meat and stuff like that, where I don't really want to get like a cotton towel, all gross or stained with like meat juices. Just kind of gross. So I'm thinking what I'm gonna do is I'm probably gonna par cook these guys, because these aren't like super nice to eat when they're raw. So I'm thinking that I'm gonna throw these in to that hot water first, just to get them par cooked. I mean, maybe a minute, 2 minutes. They really don't need a lot, especially the sugar snap peas. Like you could eat these raw and they're fine, but I just think they eat a little nicer. Oh yeah, and I'm gonna put nuts in it. This is a thing that I think you should always do. Speaking like I have any sort of authority on this. You should always put some nuts in your pasta salad, especially if you're doing a pasta salad like this, which doesn't have like a designated protein. There's no tofu or chicken or anything going into this. The protein is really just kind of coming from like the cheese and then, what little bits in the pasta. You know, walnuts don't have like a ton of protein, but they have a little bit, and they have some, you know, fat, which is nice, and some good texture. So, oh yeah, and then I'm also gonna add probably a little bit of parm. I've got some leftover rosemary from a thing I made the other day. And then I think I bought some Calabrian chili, so I'm gonna do that. This Italian bomba, this is kind of like minced up Calabrian chilies. It's really good. I basically always have some in the house, usually. I use it a lot, obviously for like Italian stuff, like pasta, but it goes in a lot of things. The pasta water is heating up. It's gonna take a minute. It's kind of a lot of water. I'm gonna move the camera and get into a better angle so that you can see me cut stuff up. So obviously this is my first time doing this. This is my first time kind of like really recording myself cooking. I'm not like super comfortable with doing it. I don't really know what angles are good. Like, I tried to frame it up as good as I could. I hope that this is like good enough that you can actually see what I'm doing. I do kind of want to explain the glove. I cut my thumb on a mandolin. This was like just a couple of days ago. If you don't know what a mandolin is, it's one of these. This is basically like a tool that lets you shave or really thinly slice like vegetables or whatever to a really exact thickness, and it's really nice, but it's also really dangerous because you use it like this. And I was mandolining some garlic, and then I was mandolining my thumb. So my fingertip went in there, and it wasn't too bad. I've had the mandolin for, I don't know, I've had it for like 6 months, and I haven't had an issue, and honestly it was kind of surprising that I hadn't had any problems yet. So being bit once in 6 months of ownership is not that bad. Really, it could be worse. So anyway, in general, just be conscious. You know, it's easy to get kind of complacent with those things, especially when you use them a bunch. I think I'm not gonna use all of this asparagus. So what I'm doing here is I'm cutting off these like woody sort of bits. These are just like really fibrous and not nice to eat. So I cut those off. Some people like bend them, and like, you know, where they snap is where you should cut it. That's, I think, a myth, and also takes forever. So I just cut off about 1 inch wherever it, you know, looks nasty, cut it off. And then I'm just cutting them into like roughly 1 inch pieces. This is just because this is a thing with pasta salad that I'm kind of opinionated about, is that everything should be like more or less the same size. You don't have to like go crazy. I think that's probably enough. This is about how much? I don't know. That's probably like half a pound, 8 ounces-ish. Got a new apron recently. This apron has a towel holder, which is really nice. I got really used to it really quickly. So I'm just gonna do the same thing for the sugar snap peas. Take like an amount, sort of kind of size them up. I think that these can probably just go like in half. Is totally fine. You can do them 1 at a time. 2 at a time is probably faster, 3 at a time, just, you know. So this is kind of based a little bit on like a pasta primavera, which is basically like a kind of pasta where it's sort of like using what's in season, using what you have, kind of like a celebration of ingredients sort of thing. So, you know, pasta salad for me changes throughout the year. You know, in spring, obviously I'm gonna use spring vegetables. You know, more towards the summer, I might include a lot more, which I think I kind of meant to get a lot more like cherry tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes. Cucumber is really good. That obviously I wouldn't par cook. I would, you know, just leave raw. In the fall, you can do like butternut squash. That's really good. I also really like when my pasta salad is kind of half vegetables or even more than that. I think it's really cool. I think when it's a lot of pasta, it's a lot of pasta. Having all the different textures, like that's a big thing for me with pasta salad is it's kind of all about texture for me. So having as many different textures as you can, as many different vegetables, different aromatics, like for example, I'm using shallot, but you could use red onion, you could use garlic, you could use green onion is really good. I've used green onion before. For stuff like this, onion, garlic, ginger, if you're putting them in pasta salad, I kind of am of the mind that these should be as small as you could like feel comfortable with getting them. I don't love having big, gigantic pieces of onion, especially raw onion, in my pasta salad, or like raw garlic. It's just not, it's not fun. So for shallot, it's usually pretty simple. I just cut it kind of like I do an onion, but it's just smaller. Kind of brace it, this like woody tip, just kind of brace it with my palm, pull the knife through, just cut it in half, and then just go down the length. Being careful. And then here's where I like actually try to get it pretty small and do the claw grip. Hold the knife like pretty firm and steady at the base right there. And then just run through, trying to get them as thin as you can. This is gonna do the majority of the work of getting it really pretty small so it eats nice. You can also make a huge mess and run through it once or twice. That's fine. I think that that's more than enough. And I think this is pretty standard as far as like onion cutting method goes. I know everyone kind of has their own philosophy on onions and how they like to cut them and you know what makes the most sense to them. And also, you know, it's like what's worth it to you. You know, for something like this where I want small cuts, I'm gonna go to the effort of doing the horizontal cut. If I'm just roughly chopping something that's gonna get blended anyway, I don't care about doing all that. You know, if I'm gonna be sauteing it really hard or caramelizing it where it's gonna lose a lot of moisture and then lose a lot of its size because of that anyway, like I'm not too concerned about it. And that's plenty. That's a whole, basically one whole shallot. I think that's all the knife work I have to do. So water's up to a boil. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna be blanching these vegetables. And this really doesn't need, this part looks a little ugly. This part really doesn't need like a ton of time. I'm not gonna time it because I've kind of done this a couple of times, so I don't really feel like I need a timer, but if you want to set one, start with like a minute and then kind of check them from there. I mean, really what you're looking for is you're looking for the color to change, but you still want them to have texture. Like we're not boiling these, we're really just blanching them. And blanching is basically just boiling something for a really short period of time. It's done for a lot of different like vegetables, just to take some of that raw edge off, like a tender but still kind of crispy texture, still like a flavor you associate with raw vegetables, just not quite as fibrous. Like that, the heat is really doing a lot of work to soften a lot of those fibers, but you really don't need a whole lot of time for that. And I've just got these in pretty heavily salted boiling water. For pasta water, like this amount of pasta water, I usually do like, you know, 2 pretty sizable 4-finger pinches. This is kosher salt. You see this a lot, especially now in like modernist baking and on the internet especially. but it's non-iodized and it's also much chunkier and coarser than like Morton's like table salt. Not quite as chunky and coarse as this. Like this is like flaky finishing salt. It just, in my opinion, gives you much better control over pinches. I think with table salt, it's so fine that a pinch like that could way oversalt something, and that's a pretty fine line with table salt. Whereas with like kosher, I just think you have a little bit more control over that. So I just have like 2 of those. You want to pretty heavily salt. Like pasta, this is pasta water. I'm gonna use the same water to boil my pasta as I did my, as I used to blanch my vegetables. There's no reason to change out the water. This is one of those things that you can kind of think about when you're cooking or at least one of the things that I think about a lot is how can I reuse things? Like what can I do with something before I have to replace it or wash it. I'm a big believer in kind of making the most out of what you're using, generating the least amount of dishes. So yeah, this is kind of what you're looking for. See, the color has changed. It's a little bit more vibrant, but everything still kind of has, everything still kind of has a little bit of bite to it. This is gonna be perfect. I don't really need to do anything other than just put it on a sheet tray. If you don't have sheet trays, get them. They're very cheap, and they're really useful. And you might have baking sheets. I recommend, if you don't have any and you're starting from scratch, I'd recommend getting thicker ones. You'll see these like really thin ones that you can like kind of bend the middle of. Those are fine, those work. Those do have a tendency to warp over time. And then what will happen is you'll put it in the oven and it'll pop and it'll make this really awful bang and can potentially even like disrupt your food if it's like strong enough. That's fine, it's just the metal is, reacting to the heat, the sudden heat change. It's changing shape as it heats up. And that can be annoying, or like I said, can even like kind of mess up your food a little bit, or fling things off of the baking sheet. You don't want that. It's better to just invest in a thicker one. These don't pop and bang, and they're worth the investment. This is a quarter sheet, and I have 2 of these and 2 half sheets, and those are double the size. They're about that big. They're in this cabinet, and you're in the way. So. Thanks for that. I think they're based on hotel pans. I don't remember exactly what it is. There's full sheets. I think I saw those when I used to work in a restaurant, but I almost never see full sheet pans in home kitchens. Yeah, that's just, I think I measured it. I think it was about 11 ounces of pasta. I'm just kind of trying to use up what I have. It doesn't look like a lot, but pasta. It will obviously kind of expand a bunch as it cooks. That's like the thing with it. That's really the idea. I'm, per cooked my vegetables. This is gonna cook for about 10 minutes. I definitely recommend, I've played around with like pasta cooking times for pasta salad a lot. Some people will say to undercook your pasta for pasta salad. Some people will say to overcook. At this point, I'm of the mind that you should overcook compared to if you were serving it hot, because what happens is what is al dente when it's warm will be firmer than al dente by the time you cool it down. It will firm up as it gets cold. So I tend to essentially overcook my pasta just slightly, by like 30 seconds or a minute. Maybe a minute longer than I would if I was serving this hot, in like a hot application. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just boiling pasta. I think you can figure it out. So I'm moving you over here because I need to zest a lemon. I do kind of want to talk about this while the pasta is going. Just give my pasta a stir. Definitely be like stirring your pasta pretty often, especially in those first few minutes of cooking. That's when it's at the most vulnerable for like sticking, especially sticking to the bottom, which is a huge bummer. But yeah, I want to talk about zesting lemons because I think this is a thing that I think a lot of people kind of get tripped up on, or sort of kind of get stuck on. There's different ways to do it. You know, there's different ways to skin a cat, but I see a lot, even in, you know, more experienced, you know, home chefs, or even in some sort of like restaurant scenarios, you'll see kind of using your dominant hand and then going like this, and then checking it, and then moving it, and then going like this, and then checking it and moving it, and going like this. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just takes forever. I much prefer to hold, this is a microplane, but any like fine grater works. This is just like a brand that I like. I like to hold this in my dominant hand and hold it like pretty high up, sort of similar grip to how you would hold a knife, or how I like to hold a knife. Similar grip, really hold it pretty high up. Hold the fruit in your non-dominant hand, and you know, keep your fingers out of the way, but you want to take it and go all the way down, and then just turn it a little bit. And instead of this being like a, you know, really vigorous, concentrated motion, it's more spread out. And you can see that like, this is pretty clean now, and I'm not really getting any of the pith in here. And you also get these nice kind of like longer sort of strands. Sometimes these are a little too long and you might need to like chop them up, but I'd rather these be too long than too short. But yeah, you really just kind of do like an arm closing motion, kind of like this. And then you can kind of get into the rhythm of it. It takes practice. It's really awkward. It feels really awkward at first, especially if you've been kind of doing the concentrated scraping motion like I showed for years, decades. Like, it can feel really uncomfortable to do this, but you can see even while I'm yammering, this whole thing was clean in about 15 seconds. Like, it really doesn't take that long. You can clean up these little bits. This is kind of why I like a microplane compared to other brands, is that I do like that you get this like edge with burrs on it, so you can kind of get into these like little grooves. I never do this. I never get like this kind of maniacal about it, but you can really get in there and clean it up however you want. But yeah, with practice, you can get these pretty much perfectly clean in 10 seconds faster. Over here stirring my pasta. Just making sure these aren't sticking to the bottom, keeping an eye on it. Again, I don't tend to set timers for stuff like that. I've cooked pasta enough times that I just kind of have a sense of how long that's gonna take. And like I said, you can run your knife through this. I'm using both the zest and the juice. Lemon zest is definitely, and citrus zest in general, is a really good thing to use more often. It lets you add citrus flavor without adding acidity, which I think is really nice. And in some cases, like, the acidity or the extra liquid from the juice is gonna like really trip you up. A good example would be like desserts. Panna cotta is a good example. Panna cotta uses lemon juice as the thickener, coagulates the milk, and that's what gives you that custardy texture. But if you wanted to increase the lemon flavor, you can't really increase the lemon juice, but you can add zest, and zest will give you like a punchier flavor. It's also just a little bit different of a flavor. And I have some leftover rosemary. I'll chop up a little bit of this. I made pizza the other day, which ended up being pretty good. I was using, and I'll put it in the description, I was using Brian Lagerstrom's sort of like sheet pan grandma pizza. That's a style where you cook it in one of those sheet pans like I was talking about. Instead of free form like a Neapolitan or a New York style pizza where they're, you know, you're stretching out the dough and everything. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more repeatable, requires a lot less technique. It's a lot easier. I highly recommend it. I think pizza is one of those things that I think is harder to do well at home than I think people want to admit. There's 1,000 pizza recipes online, hundreds on YouTube, thousands, you know, on recipe blogs and, you know, recipe websites. It's not that it's really hard, it's just that it takes a lot of practice. And I think pizza is so much work. Pizza can be so much work that it's gonna be difficult to get the practice that you need often enough to actually get good at it. I think it requires pretty frequent, you know, repetition to actually get really good at it. So you know, and I've done it, and it's not hard. Like I said, it just takes a lot of practice. So definitely do it. Definitely do the Neapolitan thing. The, you know, New York style pizza is probably the easiest one of the like free form pizzas to do at home, because you don't need the like super high heat of a Neapolitan or a pizza oven. I live in an apartment, so I don't have access to like one of those outdoor pizza ovens like the Uni. I don't know the other name brands. That's the only one I know. I honestly don't think that I would use one often enough, even if I had the space for it. But yeah, all I'm doing is just picking some basil. I'm gonna wait to actually chop this, and this is something that I would highly recommend, is when you're using fresh basil in a recipe like this, where you're gonna, I'm gonna mince this pretty fine, kind of like I did these other things. Wait until you are ready to actually put it in the food, because basil does bruise really easily, and I think it just kind of takes on sort of an ugly color. It does change flavor a little bit after you run your knife through it. So I would just, personally, I'd recommend just waiting until the last like minute. Pasta's probably been cooking, I don't know, you'd be able to tell me better because there's a clock right here and I haven't been paying attention, but probably like 8 minutes, 9 minutes if I had to guess. Sorry for the awful scraping noise. Making sure nothing's sticking. At this point, when it doesn't look translucent anymore, it looks pretty opaque, this is the part where I will start to kind of check for doneness. I don't expect it to be done, but you don't need me to tell you how to check pasta for doneness. You just eat it. Is it done? Almost. Needs like 1 or 2 more minutes. It's at the point where I would consider, this is at the point where I would consider pulling it if I was going to be finishing this in sauce, like in a hot application, like pasta with red sauce or Alfredo or something like that. But like I was saying, you do really want to overcook this. Not a ton, but just a little bit. So I'm gonna let that go just a little bit longer. But yeah, I mean, this is really easy cooking. This is, you know, very much weeknight kind of cooking. And like I was saying earlier, this is the kind of cooking that you can do. This is a little easier to repeat than like pizza, for example. You can do this once a week, a couple times a month. Use different vegetables every time, add different things to the dressing, add different aromatics, take it in wildly different directions. Like you don't have to do a very like Italian sort of thing. You could take it in a more like Mexican direction, a more East Asian direction. You could take it in like a North African direction, put some sumac and some like coriander in it. That would be really cool. That sounds really good. I would do that. Just do whatever you want. You can add, also you can obviously add protein to this. You can add cooked chicken. You can add, I guess ground beef would be kind of weird, but you could. Bacon is really good. You know, cook up some bacon. I like to do bacon in the oven. Put it on a sheet tray. I've been talking about sheet trays a lot. They're useful. I use them almost every single time I cook. Lay it out flat on a sheet tray, put it in a cold oven, set that oven to like 425, and then just walk away for 20 minutes. Come back and check on it. And that usually, 20, 30 minutes, it kind of depends on the thickness of the bacon. That's all it needs. And it's way better than cooking it on stovetop. You get like these perfectly flat pieces. It lets you get every single piece perfectly crispy all the way through. And that's how I would cook bacon for something like this. Or like salad, you want it kind of pretty crispy. So if you wanted to do that, you could, or guanciale, if you wanted to get really freaky. Pasta's done. This, all I did was just put it in a colander, just rinsed it out. Probably actually not even gonna bother with the oil like I was talking about. This has got enough water on it that it's fine. So at this point, basically everything's ready to go. It's gonna be a matter of just like dumping stuff in the bowl. But I did wanna like kind of briefly touch on this being a good vehicle for fridge cleanup. I think the most common sort of fridge cleanup recipe that you see on the internet, especially, is like stir fry, and stir fry is great. And obviously, it's really easy to kind of make that work. It's very very similar to this, where you can kind of just throw anything in, and it will probably taste good if you put soy sauce on it and eat it over rice. But this is a good way to use up leftovers. This pasta is leftover. These are two different styles from two different things that I was cooking like weeks ago. This is a great use for leftovers. If you've got some vegetables that you used for something else last week and they're still good, throw it in pasta salad. So big believer in like kind of trying to use as much of the ingredients that you buy as possible and letting as little food go bad as possible. My philosophy on that is like when I go grocery shopping and I'm planning what I'm cooking for the week, I try to have as much overlap in my ingredients as possible, especially ingredients that are either expensive or I have to buy a lot of. Herbs are not expensive, but you have to kind of buy a lot of them. I know that you can get these like dinky little blister packs, and this is fine for hard herbs like rosemary or sage. But when you're buying parsley or cilantro, it's a bad deal getting those. I would recommend getting the whole big, bundle of it. But if you only need, a quarter cup of chopped cilantro for a thing, you've got, 3/4 of a bundle left over. So you want to try and use that. It sounds kind of obvious, but I just think that it's good home economics, and it's just smart in general to just make as much use of the ingredients that you're buying as possible and have as much overlap as possible. So if I'm buying cilantro for one thing, like salsa, I'm gonna be making at least one or two other things that use cilantro so that, what is it, Gigi? I'm gonna be making, you know, a couple of things that have cilantro in them so that I'm not wasting it. You know, things like herbs go bad pretty quick. This is dry enough. I just put it over a towel. I'm just gonna move this over here. This is part of why I like these pearls, is that they're just kind of stuck together, but all you have to do is just crumble them and they sort of just fall apart. That's all you have to do. You don't have to cut them. You don't even have to go crazy crumbling them. They will crumble as you mix your food around. I will say feta is another really good option as far as pasta salad goes. Feta is great. Do like more of like a Greek thing. Put some cooked spinach in there. And I'm going to start with not all of the cooked vegetables, but maybe like that much. I have a little left over. If I need more, I have more. Not a big deal. This is all vibes. There's no measurements. Obviously, like, measurements are important for a lot of things, especially baking is where measurements really matter. But for this, it's just like, I don't know, that looks right. We'll start with that. And if it needs more, it needs more. Not a big deal. It takes 2 seconds to add more. I like to use the back of a knife, usually a butter knife, not my actual knife, but I have it. I don't want to get another one out. Just kind of tapping the edge of a jar usually helps. There we go. It helps kind of break that seal so you're not working so hard to get that, get that off. And this stuff is like not crazy spicy, but it is spicy. So I'm gonna use, what is that, like a fat tablespoon? Maybe a little bit more. Start with that. It's, it's got a little bit of heat. It's also got an extremely powerful flavor. So that's another thing. Same thing with the lemon. I'm gonna start with half of one. If I need more, I have another one. Add some olive oil. Again, an amount. You don't have to measure this kind of stuff. And then it needs some acid. So this time I'm gonna use red wine vinegar. Doesn't really matter. Going for like a vaguely sort of Italian-ish thing. It's already got lemon, but I know it's gonna need more than that, so I just add a little bit more. And then salt and pepper. So I do kind of want to talk about a little bit what happened with Meat Train 2. Give you kind of a better look at what's going on. So we had a whole plan to shoot a prequel. That was kind of the original intent. That was the idea I had months ago. We shot Meat Train 1, and I didn't really have I didn't know what I was doing. We didn't have any script, we didn't have any ideas. We started filming about 30 seconds after we had an idea that we deemed good enough and just went from there. I had no intentions of turning that into like a thing. I didn't intend to make that like a franchise, but pretty early on into thinking about what I was just gonna do this year, I thought it would be fun to do a prequel, like a Rogue One style prequel where, the very end of the very end of the of this movie would be the very beginning of the first movie. I thought that was really funny. It is more challenging because you are working with some constraints compared to the first one where we had no idea of what we were actually doing. We had no idea where it was going. You know, I knew that was gonna be harder. I knew that was gonna be more work. But I still really wanted to try it. I thought the idea was really funny. And it just kind of felt like everything sort of was going wrong a little bit. I had this idea to shoot in Harrison, New Jersey, which is like 40 minutes from here. It's just outside of Newark. Because there's this, if you know the area, if you know Harrison, you know that there's this sort of desolate looking area that you can see from the path. That's like outside of the Red Bull Stadium. I think it's not even called Red Bull Stadium. It's called Sports Illustrated, I think. And I was really hoping to get out there. But it turned out that one, you can't even really get to where I was hoping to go. And then two, right now, the PATH train, which is the sort of subway that takes you from Newark to New York City, isn't running between Newark and Journal Square. Right now, on the website, it looks like it's only in the middle of the night, but for whatever reason, they're doing it during the middle of the day. They're running shuttle buses for that part of the route that's not covered. So it was a huge pain to get to Harrison, and I didn't think that they would be doing that. I thought that they would be doing that only at the middle of the night. So it was a huge pain to get out there. We couldn't even get to the filming location that we wanted. It took a really long time. We shot the first scene, and then we wanted to shoot the rest of it in downtown Jersey City. And then it just, one of the people we were shooting with was having some issues with just like getting tired and hungry and not being as kind of focused on the movie as I was and some other people were. So, it's fine. It's not a huge deal. I think it was pretty ambitious, and maybe what would have helped is if I had written a little bit more of a script or done a little bit more with it ahead of time. But it is what it is. That's why I'm doing this instead. So I'm gonna taste this now. This has got basically everything in it that I wanted to have. Try to get a little bit of everything. That's pretty good. It is pretty good. It needs a couple of things. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm adding maybe like a teaspoon. This is QP mayo, but just any mayonnaise. I like using mayonnaise in dressings like this because it is a good sort of emulsifier and does add some creaminess. And something else that can help with that is a little bit of mustard. And these are things that are not going to be contributing a ton of their own flavor. They're kind of doing more like functional work of, like I said, emulsifying things, getting things together. A little bit more olive oil. Start pretty conservative with stuff like that. And those will do a lot of heavy lifting for sort of like getting things mixed together properly. I'm just adding the rest of the walnuts. Though, obviously the mustard especially will add a little bit of something to it, but not a ton. The spice is great. It is definitely spicy. I don't know how well this will show up on camera, but it is definitely a little bit more cohesive just with that like teaspoon of mayonnaise that I added. It just kind of helps everything sort of cling to the ingredients a little bit better. Makes for a better texture. A little bit nicer of an appearance too, because now you've got this sort of like cohesively sort of red sauce as opposed to just like a red oil slick. do one last thing. That's taking all this basil and just sort of bunching it up and running your knife through it. And I really don't like running my knife through it a bunch, especially basil. That's good. That's it. That's all you need to do. I think this is something that I learned from a guy on YouTube called Jonathan Zaragoza. He cooks a lot of like Mexican recipes, and I think he was in The Bear. He had this tip in one of his videos about not running your knife through herbs more than like once or twice. And that's something that I used to do, especially when I was learning my knife skills. You know, herbs are really easy to kind of run through a bunch of times and get super, super fine. And it's a lot of fun, but you run the risk of sort of leaching out all the water and flavor out of those herbs. And if you've ever minced, you know, if you've ever minced herbs before and your cutting board turns green, you know, that's like, you know, he's said this before in his videos, that's flavor that's on your board, not in your food. And I think that was really good advice. I think that that's something that's really easy to overdo. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's pasta salad. It's not rocket science. It needs a tiny bit more salt. And this is maybe the last thing that I'll kind of talk about as far as like cooking technique stuff. I know that this feels like it's been pretty dense with like tips and tricks, but sort of adding salt. Obviously, there's no replacement for salt. There are, you know, obviously 1,000 applications where salt is the thing you need. But sometimes when you're cooking, you know, you might want more salt, but it's a good opportunity to add more flavor. This is where I think like a lot of people are familiar with the idea of adding soy sauce to something. Soy sauce is salty, but it's also very flavorful. So this is an instance where like, okay, this needs a little bit more salt. Instead of just adding salt, adding more parm, because this is extremely salty cheese and I don't need much to increase the saltiness. So I'm thinking like, why not just add more parm, which is gonna add salt and flavor and, you know, glutamates and make it more savory and help the sauce kind of cling a little bit better. That is doing some work too. I think it needs a little bit more vegetables. Not a ton, but just a little bit more. Throw it all in there. So that's something you can think about. Anyway, that's kind of it. It's pasta salad. Like I said, not rocket science, not hard. A vehicle for experimentation, trying things, seeing what works, what doesn't, and it's okay if it doesn't. I've cooked things that don't work and are weird or like don't make any sense. That's fine. Cook things that don't make sense. Like that's maybe a big thing that I think is really fun about cooking, is that you get to do things that you maybe wouldn't get in a restaurant or maybe wouldn't be told to do, but that's okay. It's fun to just do things that are weird and just try things. Get in the habit of making things where you can do it a little different every single time. You know, this is not the same. I've never made pasta salad that's exactly like this and probably never will again. And that's fine. I mean, it's like, it's cool. So that's pretty much it. I might do this again. I might not. I haven't decided. I don't know if I like this format or not, but I really wanted to have something to upload for the Joel Haver thing. And I know I keep saying that, but that's Joel Haver is a YouTuber, makes movies. He used to make short videos. And he has this thing every year where instead of watching the Oscars, he challenges people to make a movie during the time that the Oscars are filming, and then you have like a week to edit it. And I think it's really fun. It's kind of like NaNoWriMo, which is like a challenge where you write a book in a month. Like I like those things where you have like strong constraints and, you know, limited amount of time. And it gets you a little bit more creatively motivated than just like, oh, I have all the time in the world to shoot a movie. It's like, okay, cool. I have 3 hours to shoot a movie. And that's what we did for Meat Train last year, and it was a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. You only get a week to submit something, so this is what I'm doing instead of Meat Train 2. But maybe next year, Meat Train 2.